Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another Sunday show with Reseller Mom and me, Tina. And today we have our guest, Megan. It has been a year, and Megan is from GS1, and we are going to be talking about all things barcodes for your e-commerce business, whether it be Amazon, Walmart, I suppose even Shopify stores, right? So today she's going to give us all the latest news regarding barcodes, what is required, do you need one, anything that we need to have her answer for us. Thank you, Megan, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I wanted to say welcome back. It's been awesome having you, and I think this is our third year in a row having you on the channel. So
sounds right.
It's been lovely.
Always a pleasure.
Yes, always fun and always something new learning. And barcodes are not going away anytime soon. There's always lots of news in that area. So we are excited to kind of see what's been happening, what's going to happen, and how does that apply to our business, most importantly. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you work for and what you do, and a little bit of background for those that are just starting to hear about barcodes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work for GS1 US. GS1 is actually a global organization. So there's member organizations all around the world. It's about 116 of them. I work for GS1 US. So we work with businesses here in the United States, but there's GS1 Canada, GS1 China, GS1 all over the place. We generally recommend you work with the GS1 organization that's in your country so that we're on the same time zone and speaking the same language as you. But it's all one organization, so you can work with any of us. And GS1 is actually a not-for-profit organization. We administer the UPC barcode. That's what we're known for. But there's a huge variety of other supply chain standards that we also administer. So as your business grows, people tend to use more and more of those, especially as they start to grow and kind of work with large retailers nationally, internationally, et cetera. But for the Amazon audience, we're usually thought of as the UPC people. So. And just a little bit of vocabulary on that, because I may refer to GTIN, the Global Trade Item Number. In the Amazon space, it's generally called a UPC code or a UPC, but we're talking about the same thing. It's that 12-digit number that is used to uniquely identify a particular variant of your product. And it's really relevant for Amazon sellers, because for most product categories, Amazon actually does require UPC when you set up your product.
Yes, we have a little bit of breakdown, and I did want to go over that because that's what I run into when I'm helping people on Fiverr. I run into a lot of people that they don't understand that there's different types of barcodes, and barcode is just a general term. It's like saying I bought a pair of shoes, and then when you say no, what's the EAN or the UPC? That'd be like saying I bought a pair of Nikes. So and Nike's a pair of shoes. These are all barcodes. Anything that's scannable is a barcode. Just the definition is the black and white lines. That's something that the computer can scan. And then the other thing that I run into with people who are just starting into the Amazon world is they say, oh, well, I bought my barcode at fill in the blank, and I don't know why it's not working. And for those that are running into that, it's because Amazon now, and we've talked about this happening for a long time, they take that barcode and they run it through, which you can do as well. Just Google GS1 lookup, and you can see who that barcode is purchased by. So if I'm Lucy's Barcodes and Tina wants to buy barcodes from me, they're going to be registered to Lucy's Barcode. So now Tina's Toys, when she goes to register Tina's Toys and she's trying to use that barcode in Amazon, Amazon's going to look and see, no, that barcode belongs to Lucy's Barcodes, not Tina's Toys, and not allow you to make the listing. So that's why it is so important to buy a GS1 barcode through GS1 so that when it's registered, it shows up associated to you, whether it be your company or your name. And that's something that I did want to ask you, if you could touch on that. When you query, like let's say that I have Lucy's Emporium LLC, but my brand is Lucy's Candles, how much of a link does it need to be to me? Does it just check the address or the association? How does that work?
Yeah, this is a really good question. And we do get a lot of sort of user error around this problem, because when you come to GS1 US or any GS1 member organization and you license your barcodes, you can license either one, which is just a single GTIN. And if you do that, you're going to enter all your information in for that product, sort of a brand description, your company name, et cetera. If you get a prefix, which is a batch, it could be 10, it could be 100,000, depending on your needs. It's not going to ask you that information for every product you put in, because most people, when they buy, say, 1,000 barcodes, they're not necessarily, they don't have 1,000 products yet, right? So you're going to put in a little bit more basic information. In our database, the verified by GS1 company database that other marketplaces can ping against, it's going to show your legal company name. So this is something that people run into problems with if they have a legal company name. So often it's sort of an LLC, and then they'll have a very precise brand name that looks nothing like their legal company name, and they might run into problems there. So there's two ways to handle this. It could get flagged in the algorithm. That's going to cause you to have to do some manual intervention. You're going to have to reach out. You're going to have to prove the connection between the brand and the company name, and it can be a little time consuming. If you're setting up brand registry, that's a helpful way to make it a little bit easier as you kind of grow your business. But this is definitely something that can happen. So some people choose to come in and they buy prefixes by the brand so that they can stick with just their brand, for that database. So they're not going to run into that problem. But it's really a personal choice. It sort of depends on how you do business. The other benefit there is if you have multiple brands, if you acquire a prefix for each brand and then you want to sell one of those brands, it becomes a lot easier to transfer a prefix if it's per brand instead of having multiple brands under the same one. So, it's a business decision. There's a couple ways to think about it. Sort of depends on, maybe your future and how you're thinking about these things and how much of a pain it might be for you to have to prove the link.
Yeah. So to recap something like that, if it was Tina's Toys LLC, but I owned Lego and I owned Barbie and I owned Fisher-Price, it would be better to buy the UPC under Lego, Barbie, Fisher-Price, rather than under Tina's Toys LLC.
I mean, it sort of depends on how you want to do it, but I think we do see that a lot because especially in the Amazon space, people are constantly acquiring new businesses and selling, their businesses amongst each other to aggregators, et cetera. So being able to take a whole prefix, the Barbie prefix, sell Barbie and be able to transfer the whole thing, that makes a much cleaner business decision. And you're not dealing with that trying to prove the link. But it's sort of, again, it's up to the individual business to decide.
Yeah, that's where it gets really sticky. And that's that I dive into all the time with Fiverr people. And then sometimes they come to me and they have their business name is different than their company name, and different than their brand name, different than their product name. And, I'm like, this is what's messed up. You have all these different names. And I said, Amazon doesn't know that you're linked. That's what we're trying to prove is we got to link it together. So how can you do that? Do you have any suggestions on that? Like, what's the easiest way to show proof in a business setting? What's like the most common thing that people use?
Yeah. So if people have already encountered this error, right, and they can't sort of move forward and set up, we generally tell people to create a letter on their own letterhead that provides the brand permission to sell using the UPC that is linked to, to allow Barbie to sell under Tina's Toys UPC. That's generally what we do under Tina's Toys a letterhead.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the challenge is it is a manual process. We know manual processes when you're trying to work on Amazon are going to slow you down a little bit. So it's just something to be aware of.
And to follow up on that, the next question that I would have on that is, can I transfer the ownership of my UPC if I sell my brand?
You absolutely can. And this is an important thing to keep in mind. And actually, this is something people ask about a lot. And it's a fairly straightforward process, actually. What's the key piece to understand is that you have to transfer the entirety of a prefix, right? So if you license 1,000 capacity prefix and you sell your brand, if you need to transfer over that full prefix. So what I said before, if you're, putting some Lego UPCs on there and some Barbie UPCs on there and you sell Barbie, the purchaser of Barbie, you guys are going to have to work it out because somebody is going to have to get a new prefix and reassign, which is a little tricky, and it's not ideal.
So it would be ideal for you to use different prefixes for each brand name under your, like, I look at it as a house, right? Tina's Toy is the house. And in the house, we have these different rooms. And in each room, one room has Barbie, one has Lego, right? So I would ideally have a different prefix that I would buy from GS1 for Barbie, a different set of prefix numbers for Lego, and keep those separate within the house.
Yeah. I think that's generally best business practice, especially if you think there's a possibility you might offload one of those businesses in the future.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually ran into issues this week where a guy I'll keep with Tina Toys to keep his information quiet, but he used to be Tina's Toys made in Italy, and now he just wants to be Tina Toys. And I'm like, everything's tied with the made in Italy. You have to you got to buy them under the new brand name, and he doesn't have the new brand name registered or trademarked or set up. Well, we can't do what you want yet. It's
and I do have a question. So I will also work with some clients who they're new to Amazon or Walmart. They're new to e-commerce, and so they're possibly getting their item, let's say, for instance, off of Alibaba, and they want to do fitness and kind of modeling that after Lululemon and popular brands. And so they want to have these different leggings and the different exercise tops. And of course, they're going to have different color choices, right? We've got black and blue and pink. And then each top has small and medium, and right. And then they get overwhelmed when I explain that each piece has to have its own individual barcode, just like it has in the store. And then the cost seems overwhelming now to launch this brand, right? This idea that's in my head. I'm excited to sell these things. And I thought my cost was just for the items. And then we tack on a UPC cost on top of that. That can get quite expensive. And I know you can buy a single UPC for $30, but there are package deals. What would be your bit of advice or suggestion for somebody who's maybe considering launching like a yoga fitness brand of products that you haven't even really vetted yet to know if it's going to do well? And now you've invested a lot of money, not only in the product, but also the UPCs you're wanting to attach to them.
Yeah, that's a great question, Tina. And so firstly, we do have a tool on our website. It's called the Barcode Estimator tool that can help people work through the number of barcodes they're going to need, right? So it'll talk through, your styles, your colors, your quantities, help you understand that piece. So because for some people, that in and of itself is just helpful to have that in front of you, right? How many are actually going to need here? Mm-hmm. It'll just do the math for you, basically. So, but I think, in apparel, we generally aren't seeing people use the single G10. There's just too many variations in apparel for that to be cost effective, right? Because you have every single variation is going to come generally in at least, 5 sizes and multiple colors. So getting those single barcodes really doesn't make sense. Now, in terms of the prefix size, we generally recommend people think about the minimum they need and then plan for whatever their growth plan is. So, do you have 20 styles right now? Does it make sense? You could get 10 capacity prefixes and cover your 20, but maybe it makes more sense to invest in the 100 capacity, which is going to cost you a little bit more upfront, but your cost per code goes down a little bit. and it gives you room to grow. And some people are very finicky but want to get everything on the same prefix number. So that's, that's something that some people just for their sort of headspace and organization really like. And so that's something to keep in mind. Again, this is another question of what really works for your business. The best thing I can say is, you got to run the math, decide what works. Like, is that upfront cost worthwhile to you? There's nothing to say that you can't use it. If you use the first 20 of 100 and then that business doesn't work out and you want to do something different, you can still use those remaining 80 codes on something else in the future. So that's something else to keep in mind, especially if you're not particularly in production on that original 20 anymore. It's not necessarily a problem if, you're planning for the future there. So I think people just have to use their sort of what makes sense for them. Is that money, is that upfront cost too problematic for you to begin with? Start a little bit smaller. If you're thinking of growing really quickly, then, maybe go a little bit bigger.
And so you mentioned that they could use the 20 and they'd say have 80 remaining. So then the next question is, some people will ask me, can I reuse a barcode? I launched it to be on my grape drink mix, but my grape drink mix, I can't get that flavor anymore from my supplier. So now it needs to be a cranberry grape drink mix. Can I now just use that UPC and change my listing to be the cranberry grape not using my next UPC code?
Yes, and this also comes up a lot. So best practice is not to reuse a UPC number. And I think you have to think about the fact that now online, no product really disappears because you could have people selling it on eBay in 10 years, right? Hopefully not a cranberry grape drink, but other products for sure. That even products that aren't in production anymore still have a very long life online. And so generally we say, don't reuse your UPCs. It's not best practice, especially if you are in some retailers. Got some people that are going to be in, local grocery stores. They may not have gone nationwide, but that can cause all kinds of trouble for your trading partners if that's the case, and generally not recommended.
So to follow up with that, I've had a couple cases within the last 2 months where the product was never launched, but the barcode was used, and then they needed to kind of delete that and reuse it properly. They put in, the wrong name or the wrong something. So it was never actually launched, but they did make a listing with the UPC. Amazon has really cracked down on tombstoning. Well, they used to be able to call it tombstoning. You delete, you waited. Sometimes you needed to use the listing loader to delete an item out of the catalog. And within a day or two, you could then reuse that barcode and it would be purged from the system so you could get that listing corrected. And that's been more difficult over the last 2 months than it has in the past. So I don't know what's going on there. That's where, they send us a gajillion emails. And I'm like, that's the email I need to know stuff about. But they're quiet. And if you call, even the people on the other line, they have no idea. They're like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And I suspect it just has to do with it's probably difficult to build in, was that product actually launched and used somewhere? And, it's sort of the knowledge of the product is probably a little harder than just to say no. Right? It's a little easier.
So they're doing something on the back end, and it's irritating because we don't know what they're doing, and things that used to work are not working as they usually had. I did bring up the lookup system, though. I wanted to show people how to do that. It is, again, if you just go to Google and you type in GS1 lookup, you're going to get this website. You don't have to log in to do this. You could just go down here to verify product. I pulled a UPC code from a Lego product since we were talking about Lego. And then, where did it go? There we go. So it is right here. You can see who is registered to this G10. Company name is Lego System AS. And then you've got an address, a website, a license key, the type, and where it was from. This one started in Denmark. So this is how you can tell if you're like, I don't know why my barcode isn't working. go in and search yourself, because that's what I first do when clients hit me up and they're like, my barcode won't work. Okay, well, because it's registered to Timbuktu. Who is this? Oh, I started that company 3 years ago and I didn't roll with it. And okay, that's the problem. It also is really good if you are listing, let's say that you are allowed to list other products on Walmart or eBay or Amazon, and you want to know who that barcode is associated with. You can come and look it up here. And that I use all the time when I'm making listings on platforms and I want to use the barcode. Like, how is it typed in?
Because you want the name to match it in Amazon, match GS1, because Amazon does check.
Yeah. So exactly. If you're having trouble with name matching, I'll sometimes go in and copy and paste this name and boom, okay, we're good to go then. The other thing is, if you're listing and having trouble, and maybe you can explain the technology behind this, but they'll try to use it like this. And I say, go in and add 2 zeros, and then it works. What is the technical reason behind that? I don't.
And I think this is another piece of this that might be worth talking about too, is one of the most common questions we get is someone who has recently gotten a prefix or a G10. They go to set up an Amazon listing and they call us and like, it doesn't work. and one of the most common reasons that this is what's happening is they go to set up a listing, and there's a drag down menu that includes UPC, EAN, G10, I think JN in there, and maybe ISBN. And so sometimes what they're doing is selecting G10 and then putting in their UPC. And there's we like to call it the alphabet soup. What's the difference there? On that drag down menu, if you are selecting G10, Amazon's looking for a 14-digit number, which you would use for a case. If you select UPC, they're looking for a 12-digit number. And if you're selecting EAN, they're looking for a 13-digit number. And so we get a lot of people that simply like select G10, which is not unreasonable because they've licensed to G10. They think that's what it is, but it's just a sort of a vocabulary mismatch.
Right.
And so that's probably, when you're in that verified by GS1 tool, if you're trying to search a G10 or a UPC or an EAN, and you might be putting in the wrong numbers. And occasionally, if you put in that, you could wind up in a situation where if you've taken off a zero or you've added a zero, you might actually populate somebody else's number. Like if you're putting in a UPC, but you add an extra zero and it's popping up as an EAN, and somebody actually has that EAN, it causes kind of problems like that. So I sort of suspect that's what you're seeing. Yeah.
Well, and yeah, I have a client that has a bunch of barcodes, but on Walmart, everything it only wants with the 2 zeros in front of it. If you try to do just the UPC, it's not going to make the listing. I find it more on Walmart that you have to add the extra zeros in the front than on Amazon, but that's typically what happens. I'm like, just add 2 zeros. It's all good.
Now, on the topic of creating listings, I know that this is not part of what your company does, but some sellers will apply for what is called a G10 exemption when they go to make listings on Amazon. And they will do this because you can create the listing under your brand name and not have to have paid for a barcode, right? So people are trying to start out on a budget. Well, I don't know if my idea is going to work. So rather than spend too much money, I want to apply for a G10 exemption under my brand name. And now they've created their listing and it's doing well. Now they feel like other people have jumped on their listing and hey, wait a minute, this is my brand. I made it. And, now it's done well. And now I want to put a UPC code on it and I want to own it. So I can prove to Amazon, I am the owner and these people are not authorized to be on my listing. Can I now buy a UPC code for that item I had a G10 exemption for and add that on Amazon? I don't know if that's something you've ever had anybody ask you or if it's anything you are able to help sellers with.
In terms of what happens on Amazon, I'm not actually sure on that. I can, anyone can come to us at any time and license a UPC, or a prefix or a single G10. So as far as our end of it, come on over, no problem. I do know, that you can't just change a UPC on Amazon. We've had that come up, with a lot of folks that are using a UPC that maybe they didn't acquire directly themselves and are trying to switch it out. And often they have, there are some sort of agencies that say they have a process for fixing it and can kind of get it done, but it's not easy, to say the least.
Yeah.
That's mine. I have had very few and far between cases where I can get a UPC changed. Amazon will tell you no, that it's not possible, that if you list under generic and or you list with G10 exemption, you cannot change the brand, you cannot change the UPC code. Have I done it? Yes. Have I done it after they told me I can't do it? Yes. But it is like
very difficult. Very difficult.
Almost impossible. And it's not something that I would recommend doing.
Yeah, Lucy and I both run across a lot of people that will take, which has nothing to do with GS1, of course, that will take these courses and they tell them to buy the UPC just listed under generic to get started, and then you can change it to your brand name later. And that's what they will do. They will create these listings under the brand name generic using their proper UPC code under the right name that they bought it under, and now you cannot change your brand name from generic to your actual brand name. And that's why I wonder, does Amazon ever actually reach out to GS1 to verify this? And just because of behind the scenes, I always wondered, is Amazon even making an effort?
I think there's constant efforts to try to improve this, this situation. I think it's just it's a lot of sellers, it's a lot of companies, it's a lot of resellers. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of complications to it. And I think when you start to get down to the individual request, it becomes time consuming, because when everybody has an individual request, you need a lot of people to fix it. So, yeah. I mean, efforts are sort of constantly underway across business. GS1 is a business to business organization, right? So, we are constantly working with folks like Amazon, folks like Walmart, to try to represent some of these issues that folks are having. And, it's a challenge. What we say is just try to start right. I think that's the easiest thing to do. I know people have concerns about sort of the upfront cost, but I think if you think about the cost of insurance, the cost of your actual, your inventory, the cost to ship it, the cost of tariffs, it's not a huge cost when you compare to all of the other things you need to do business. And if you can just start off right, you won't have to deal with it in the future. And that's our best guidance.
Yeah. And it's nice to know that Amazon, that there are some joint efforts with GS1 to Amazon, that you do kind of speak on the behalf of people like us who do buy barcodes, because clearly there is a lot of Amazon sellers that buy from you, because Amazon is a huge catalog and made up primarily of third-party vendors, not Amazon themselves. And so all of us as sellers have made these mistakes knowingly and unknowingly, and it can be impossible to fix. So obviously you don't want to be a hotline for Amazon sellers, oh, I've got this problem. So how is it that you come to know the problems we face, to actually take it to Amazon when these meetings do occur, when you're kind of being an advocate for the people who are buying the barcodes?
Well, I can speak for myself personally, which is that, I'm here, I listen to folks like you. Please put my contact information, in the sort of the notes, and, folks can always feel free to reach out to me, my email, or, connect with me on LinkedIn, things like that. I am always, and a lot of people can testify this, I'm always happy to take a call, take a Zoom with someone who is struggling with an issue, to give them the best guidance that I can. And if there's something that we can sort of escalate up the chain within GS1, where maybe I'm not the right person to answer it, we'll definitely do that. Particularly some of these more complicated issues, we're always willing to help however we can to help them get resolved. You mentioned, it's sort of a merger before where somebody sort of changed their business a couple of times. Things like that can get complicated in our system and cause a lot of problems for you. But I can tell you our team is, it might take a little while. It might be a little complicated. We might need some documentation, but we're always willing to help. We have a robust customer support team that they're real people. They're in Ohio and they pick up the phone. They're always happy to help field these questions. A lot of times we just get basic questions. Like I mentioned, that sort of EAN, UPC, GTIN piece. That's the kind of thing that someone legitimately is really unhappy and they really think that they have acquired something that's not going to work for them. And it's often a simple fix. So anywhere from there to the much more complicated, how do we make sure that your company information in our database is going to align with what you need to put on Amazon? We're going to try to do everything we can to help you through that from where we sit to try to make it easy. I know it's not easy, but we'll do what we can for you.
Which is really nice because, in today's world, and especially for our e-commerce sellers dealing with Amazon and Walmart, their customer service is terrible. I mean, it's so terrible. Terrible is actually being nice, to say the word terrible. You don't get anyone US based, and you rarely get someone who truly authentically can or will even help you. So knowing that GS1 is a company that you do speak to somebody, here in your own country, that, language, there's no language barrier, and you feel like you're talking to someone with common sense and that can reason with you, is really nice to know that there is some help there.
Yes, absolutely. And again, we're not for profit. Our goal is to help business do better, work together better. We have been connecting small businesses with massive mega businesses and vice versa, right? Where do you buy Coke? At the deli down the street, right? So that is our model, is to make sure that businesses big and small can do business together every day. And we want to do everything we can to make sure that that's as easy as possible for you.
Yeah.
Changing gears a little bit, we wanted to talk about Prime Day, right? We've got Prime Day coming up July 8th through 11th. I'm trying to remember if it was that time last year. Does anybody remember?
It's always around July. I feel like it's always in the month of July or late June. Yeah.
And so we were talking about this earlier. You had mentioned that it's get your sales and your codes and everything up and going and ready for Prime Day. Do you have any tips for that?
I think we're sort of at the tail end of inventory management, but that's always something we recommend, is make sure you have the appropriate amount of stock. I know that people are always a little hesitant to overstock, and I think that's fair because that costs you money too. But it's just something to be aware of. Do your best. Speak to your suppliers, especially if you're selling a kind of a fairly common product. You can often speak to your suppliers and get a sense of how much stock you should have. That's one thing we always kind of recommend to people. Again, at this point, you hopefully you're pretty close to knowing what your stock will be at that time, and it's either on a boat or on a plane for you. But yes, there was some interesting information on those recommendations that Amazon provided about making sure your ads are properly budgeted, and as always, having your Prime Day deals ready to go is a great strategy. We still got plenty of time, I think, for people to improve their content if they have that ability, and make sure they have budgeted properly to make sure that, because their ads are going to get a lot more clicks during that time period, right? I think 2024 was the largest Prime Day of all time. So who knows what we're going to see this year? But I'd say just be ready and have everything funded so that you don't miss out.
Yes, absolutely. Prime Day is I see it being really good for those private label sellers that sell, like say lights for your patio or something that's people are in the market for shopping and doing. There's definitely more products. There's products that it's great for, and then products that maybe it's not great for, so I see them selling quite a bit. And then I did want to just make sure, if you wanted to enroll your brand, you can always go to Amazon's site and find, how to enroll your brand, what the requirements are. We always suggest if you are looking for requirements, go to that website's policies and pages to figure that out. We'll often see questions in our Facebook group on, oh, I didn't know the policy for this, or I didn't know the terms of service for this. And I'm going, most of the time, 99% of the time, you can find it online. Same with Amazon's barcode requirements. They have the policy written out online. Walmart does the same. eBay does the same. They're all in there. You have to go digging for it, but they will tell you how big does the label need to be, what format, what your printer specs need to be, all of that. And then with the registration, when I coach people and they're like, oh, I'm launching this brand. Do I need to be registered? Do I need a UPC? It's very similarly to what you had spoke about. You know, where do you see yourself going? Because you're building the foundation right now. If you're just farting around and you have $200 to blow, then, you know, it doesn't really matter what you do. But if your goal is to build from a good foundation up and build a business, you're going to want to do the brand registry and do the barcodes and set everything up correct and get that name, lock in whatever your name is going to be, lock in your name so that it's all cohesive across all of your, wherever you're selling, wherever your social medias are, etc., because you're going to want to have that all linked up. That was my
one piece that comes up a lot for us when it comes to brand registry, which, you know, is always great. I mean, we tell people that don't sell on Amazon, hey, go register your brand, you know, it can't hurt, right? So
exactly.
Do it before somebody else does. So, but one thing that people are often looking around for is their GS1 certificate. All right, so this is basically a certificate of proof of licensing for either your single GTINs or your prefixes. And this can be found, you know, you got to log into your to Data Hub, which is our system. It's actually a free tool that we have to help people manage their GTINs. They can create barcode files in there. So if you want to create a barcode file, download it, send it to your packaging manufacturer, you can do that right there. But most importantly, it's that GTIN management. So, you know, I have definitely fielded calls from people that created hundreds of thousands of units and did the math wrong on their GTIN. So now they have all of these barcodes with a UPC that's not theirs, not because they used a barcode that didn't belong to them, but because they literally did the math wrong. So that's something we never want to see. You know, that's money you should never have to spend. So that's a tool that you can, you know, as long as you're a member of GS1 US, you can just log right in and use that. And in that space as well, you can download that GS1 company certificate, which is going to help you, you know, proof of ownership. And
yeah, I'm trying to find an example. I know I have one, but keep talking. I'm just
and there's other marketplaces as well that can help you sort of set up whatever their version of brand registry is.
Mm-hmm. And now, is there anything new up and coming with GS1? Is there any changes in the near future that we should be aware of?
So one of the major things we're talking about right now is that transition to 2D barcode on pack. And so what a 2D barcode is a square barcode, essentially a QR code. Right? We see them everywhere. You're used to scanning with your phone, reading a menu in a restaurant. But something that's really important to understand about those kinds of barcodes is they hold a ton of data. A UPC barcode basically only holds 12 digits. It just holds that number. And then it relies on that number being linked into some kind of back-end system to carry other data. So usually if you're at the grocery store has, hey, here's what that UPC is. Here's how much it costs, if there's any sales, et cetera. And that's in their back-end system. It's not in the barcode itself. But a 2D barcode can hold several thousand characters of data. So you can start to put things into that barcode, like the expiration date, where it came from. You can even serialize a product using that. So if you want to know the individual item, you know, not just sort of the variant of that product, but that specific product, 2D barcodes are going to allow for capabilities like that. You're already starting to see some, you know, brands putting both on packaging. You'll see the UPC and you'll also see that 2D barcode. It uses a standard called Digital Link. It's a GS1 standard that allows you to sort of pass that 2D barcode over the register, and it's going to work just like a UPC. It also works like a QR code, so you can phone scan it. You can create an entire customer-facing experience with it. And it does all this sort of fun, it can do a whole bunch of fun stuff on the back end to help, on the logistics side, on the sort of retailer side, just to make that barcode, put it to better use.
And so are you in charge of if I get a product and I want to have that 2D barcode and attached to it, I also want when the customer scans it, we'll have the instructions on how to use the said item. It within the GS1 hub where I own it. And do I go in there and manually type in this information? Do I do it right there on GS1? How does that work?
As of right now, that more of those advanced capabilities are sort of not in the, in GS1 Data Hub. So you would go to a solution provider of some kind and they would help you set it up. Okay. And minimally, we recommend people as that transition starts to come, and everybody's got to sort of keep an eye on their own business partners and in terms of when's the best time to sort of make a transition like that. Although some smaller businesses, they're set up to do it really quickly. When you're smaller, you can move fast, which is kind of nice. But there'll be minimally make sure your website is attached on the public facing side, because why not, right? You've got, right. You've got the real estate, and over time, we're going to see as consumers, if I pick up a product on the shelf and it's got a QR code at this point, I'm often scanning it, right? Unless I'm very familiar with the product already. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll scan it at home just to see what's up, but I'm going to scan that barcode and see what it's trying to tell me. So that QR code. So I think if you're starting to put it on pack and it doesn't go anywhere, that's probably not a great customer experience. Right? You want to make sure it's at least going to go to your website. And some folks are going to have much more advanced, I think, experiences, and where you'll be able to enter contests. They'll have sort of a very specific experience based on that. And for right now, again, there's lots of solution partners that can kind of help you set up that experience. And the same with the back end information in the barcode itself.
Now, does a barcode like that cost a little more because of all of the cool features that come with it? Or is it just like buying the regular barcode?
The actual identifier, as far as GS1 is concerned, is the same.
Yeah.
So it's the UPC that goes in that barcode is the same as the UPC that would go in a traditional UPC barcode. It's all of the data around it that is new in addition. So while actually creating the barcode itself right now might cost you a little more because you can't just download it for free from Data Hub, you have to invest a little bit more into it. I think over time, that's really probably going to pay off for you, because it's going to allow you to interact so much better with your customers.
That's very cool.
What I'm finding with customers is they're really excited, especially let's say they sell shampoo and they want to have the ingredients, and it's, certified organic, and it was done in the rainforest. They have all this information about their product, and their bottle is only so big, so they can't market all of those certificates and update them too. So, if they have an update to ingredients or what they need a warning or a feature, then they can just update it on the barcode side, and then when they scan, they're now seeing the most updated information instead of having to recall products and relabel or change the manufacturing process. So that's really cool.
And that 2D barcode can actually be printed smaller. So that audience exactly is one that I think is going to benefit a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, here's a miniature bottle of lotion, right? They can only fit so much print on it. Yeah, that's a really good point, Lucy. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Right. Or tutorials or products that go with it. When you think about like cream, like, any kind of self-care, there's always a multi-step process. So if you
and you can link it to the other products. Here's our face toner. You may need the primer and the cleaner and the, here's the brush that goes with it. So it's a great way to bring the customer in and show them what else can go with said product. So that's what they're loving it in the beauty department. I did want to just touch on just kind of like a say about the transparency codes on Amazon, because for those listening and you're like, what about transparency codes on Amazon? That is a completely different that's not through Megan with GS1.org. That is through Amazon. But what people are doing is they are going and registering with GS1, getting their item barcoded. And then the transparency code is an extra step. If you are really worried about somebody duplicating your product, jumping on your listing, you can enroll in the transparency program with Amazon and then purchase an additional 2D barcode, which is, just the QR code printed thing. And then now you're going to put a different one on every item. So it is a different code for every item. And they cost, I want to say it's 8 cents, but don't quote me. It's very cheap. But for 8 cents a product, every single item will now have its own transparency code. So you have to work that into your label or to your manufacturing or whoever's going to label your items. Somebody's got to do it. And that is another way to kind of lock your product up if you are having problems with black hat tactics.
Say that fast 3 times.
If people are trying to rip you off, because that's what I typically find. I work with a lot of people that buy from Alibaba. They did the due diligence, they registered their brand, they bought the UPC code, and now somebody's going over to Alibaba and they're like, yeah, just make these stuffed animals for me. Here's the barcode. And they jump on the listing and they take it over, and it's called hijacking, and it's becoming more and more apparent. And that's where the transparency, once you enroll, nobody can send in that product without it being enrolled into the transparency program. So it is a little bit different.
And using that in conjunction with proof of ownership of your UPC really marries the protection of that product.
True. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a very exciting program. I've definitely, heard from folks like in supplement brands where their own business was basically destroyed because somebody sold an imitation product that looked just like theirs and got sick, basically. So when you're talking anything consumable or sort of pet products, anything that's going to get put in a mouth, the baby products, stuff like that, it's a really great way to help you protect your brand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Because brand registry, while it is great, you can't issue violations or lock your brand down until your USPTO, your trademark, is published and up and going. Your registry does not allow you to send out violations or kick people off of your listing until that 9-month period of getting approval from your trademark is done. A lot of people don't understand that. So you have a good almost year of exposure that can be difficult. I'll run into people. I launched 6 months ago and now I have 3 people selling my product, and it's crummy, but it's what happens out there.
Well, the lesson is the sooner you set it up, the better.
Exactly. And sooner the better. All right.
We have nothing else for you, Megan. Thank you for answering all the questions and sharing things we didn't know.
Absolutely. I'm always, call me anytime. And again, please feel free to share my contact information. I'm always happy to take calls, to take emails, if people are having any specific problems on the GS1 side that I can help with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been lovely having you on again, and lots of great information. Thanks for always explaining it and going over it with everybody. And I will edit the notes to add in your contact information down below. I think I had just put the GS1 site down there when I set this up, so I will go back and add it in there. And thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.